So what do? How can we alter the pressing in order to still get a training stimulus but to decrease pain, right? And here are the things that I like to try, right? So let's say that bench press hurts. How can I change bench press so that it can be a little less painful and I can still train and get a training effect? For one, we can try limiting the range of motion. So if I go down onto my back and try a floor press, I'm not going quite as deep as I was before, and sometimes that offloads some of the painful tissues in the shoulder and we can get away with training, right? You can also try changing your grip width, right? So right here I have a close grip. My elbows are tucked a little closer to my side. Sometimes that can decrease some of the pain that people experience when they're pressing. I can also vary the angle. So here's me doing an incline press. So I literally just went from flat to inclined. Sometimes pressing this angle feels quite a bit better. The last thing we can try is dumbbells. Sometimes with dumbbells, if you change the position of where your hands are facing, so using more of a neutral grip as opposed to a pronated grip, that can feel a bit better for your athletes. Just all a bunch of ideas to try to see if you can decrease some of the pain during pressing. We're going to go over these a little bit more in depth. So when we switch to dumbbells, right? So if I go from barbell to dumbbell, it's for one going to lessen the load, right? And we just talked earlier that when you have shoulder pain, if we decrease the load, it's a little less stress on the shoulder. So if we just go from barbell to dumbbells, just because we decrease that load, sometimes that's enough so that things don't hurt anymore, right? The other thing is that dumbbells are unstable, right? And because of that, inherently you just can't use as much load, right? These dumbbells are moving all over the place. We have to control that. So a lot of our muscle power goes towards stabilizing the joint and stabilizing the dumbbell as you go overhead. So because of that, you just can't use as much weight, which can be a good thing when we're trying to modify our exercises. The other thing that dumbbell pressing does is it alters the elbow angle. It's a little bit easier to keep the elbows facing forward in a dumbbell press as opposed to a barbell press, just because when you're in a barbell press, you're wound up into a little more external rotation, the elbows are a little bit wider, and we're not able to be in the same position as with a dumbbell overhead press. And because of that, it can be a little bit more friendly on the shoulder, right? Lastly, and this is very specific to Olympic weightlifting, if you have pain in the front rack position in the shoulder, using dumbbells a lot of times is going to decrease some of that pain. You're not wound up in as much shoulder external rotation. So you can give that a shot and see if that helps out in your athletes that have pain in the front rack position with a barbell. Just throwing some dumbbells in the mix, right? So we already spoke about this a little bit, but if you switch to dumbbells, right, or you go close grip, or you use something like a Swiss bar, that's going to change the position of the elbows in relation to your torso. And altering this elbow angle is actually something that's a lot of times beneficial for people that have shoulder pain. So if you're prescribed lift for the day is a bench press and you go close grip, or you use something like a Swiss bar, right, or you use dumbbells, that's something that sometimes it can decrease some of the pain that your athletes are experiencing. Okay? So the shoulder is a little bit challenging just because if it's really painful, and a lot of times all pressing exercises are out, right? If it's painful enough, bench press doesn't feel good, incline press doesn't feel good, floor press doesn't feel good, overhead press feels bad. All pressing exercises can be pretty painful, right? If that's the case, then what I would recommend is to try to substitute some of the pressing exercises for pulling exercises, right? So that might mean trying some TRX or ring rows, some dumbbell rows, single arm rows, or chest supported rows, or some strict pull-ups. What's interesting about pulling exercises for individuals that have impingement syndrome of the shoulder is that this pulling exercises will activate the lats. The lats pull the humeral head or the ball down in the socket, which can create a little bit extra space for the rotator cuff. So some of those tendons that are irritated in impingement and rotator cuff tendinopathy tend to feel really good when you do pulling exercises. So athletes where they have pain on the side or the front of the shoulder during pressing, a lot of times rows are A-OK. No pain or problems with those. So if you can't get away with any pressing whatsoever, just substitute some pulling exercises in the mix. All right. What else works pretty well for individuals that have shoulder pain? Well, for one, crawl variations, right? So if you've got some anterior shoulder pain and it feels pretty poor to press, you can try doing some crawl exercises. So crawling is good because it's going to strengthen some of the muscles that you utilize to press. So your deltoids are active, the pec muscles are active. We're getting some good shoulder blade strengthening in the mix, but it generally doesn't hurt too much. So what kind of crawl variations do we use? You can crawl forward, you can crawl backwards, you can crawl to the side, you can do some inchworm, whatever you like. Generally, try to keep the elbow locked out. I know my elbow is bent here. This is a little bit more an advanced crawling exercise, but if you keep the elbow locked out, it's usually a little nicer on the shoulder, right? So what else can you do if someone's shoulder hurts? Well, for one, sometimes it's a volume issue, right? So some individuals can handle pressing 1 time a week, but they can't handle pressing 2 or 3 times a week. So you can play around a little bit with their pressing volume, right? So let's say that we take someone's pressing volume down from bench press 3 days a week down to 1 day a week. All of a sudden, their shoulder's feeling much better. Later on the week, when pressing is supposed to pop up, we throw in pulling or rowing variations, and all is well in the world of shoulder pain, right?